Welcome to Everyday Elephants. I'm your host, Tanner Olson, and in a minute, I'll be joined by Phil and Katie and Ted. Everyday Elephants is a podcast that discusses what the world is discussing. We take a close look at the elephants in the room, everything from politics to trends to religion. Together, we look for where hope is in the midst of the change and chaos and confusion. Welcome to Everyday Elephants. We're back. Episode 4. So far, we have been back every single week that we said we'd be back, which is a huge accomplishment, I would say, for at least Phil, Ted, and myself. Katie, you're the one who's keeping us on task and on schedule, so thank you.
That's why she's
before
on
we
the show.
dive in, we needed it big time.
We needed
and
Katie.
Because without her, I feel like, we'd be letting other people down. Like, she's here, she's helping us keep the boat afloat, so this is good. Before we dive into all the things that we're going to talk about today, because there's going to be a lot that we talk about today, Katie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Well, first of all, that's a lot of pressure because I feel like, I really need to live up to the shoes that you are,
It's like saying you're the glue that holds the band together.
Well, you really are.
Right,
you're
right. And I'm like,
I'm
just, and I'm hoping I know the rhythm, so like, this is it right here for me. So, I am doing great. I am super tired because, as everyone knows, maybe they don't know, but I'm pregnant. So I am like sleepy.
Whoa, big announcement.
I am.
Big announcement.
Oh, for Everyday Elephants.
We haven't heard since episode 1.
Yeah.
See, that's how forgetful I am.
So
I will celebrate every time.
Yeah, it's just like it's the first time, but I'm pretty far along. I'm halfway through, so just tired, drinking lots of water, being a teacher, staying afloat, so doing great.
Good.
Thanks for asking.
Ted. Oh, my pleasure. Theodore, how are things in the great city of Georgetown, Texas?
Things are good. Had a great staff meeting this morning. Me and my brother work at a church together, and just it was a good day of getting things done. Was sick earlier in the month, and so I feel like I've been playing catch up for a while, and today was like I knocked a lot of things off the checklist before, I was like, okay, 3:45, I'm going to be on for the podcast. So it is just, those days where you're like, hey, I got stuff done today. And so that it feels good to say, hey, I knocked things out today. I do
Monday.
Work every day, but today I did work. Right, exactly.
And it's a Monday, so if you're getting your week if you're starting your week off on the right foot, it's a game changer.
Exactly.
I'm glad you're doing well, man. But I have to say, you started off with great in staff meeting, but you recovered. So I'm glad you're
doing well. Part of it is my niece is there. So Matt's daughter, who's like, I think she's 10 months now. I'm not sure exactly on date. So she's right at almost 10 months or at 10 months because she's a February birthday, but I just can't remember the day. But she is a ball to have because she now talks. And by talks, I mean she's learned how to make really loud vocal noises. And it's a lot of fun.
She's a daring.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And what's fantastic about it is I get to enjoy the pure, fun of it, while my brother, who is, they're doing sleep training stuff right now, so he's figuring out, so they're going through it, and he's just like, I love you, but stop. And I'm like, yes, I love it because you're this kid. I love it because it's getting on my brother's nerves, and I love it because he's like, I love you so deeply, but please, just inside voice. But she was a blast, and so that makes staff meeting that much better.
And y'all were eating breakfast tacos, right?
I had an egg bake this morning.
Ooh.
So
we'll have to talk more
Very
about
fancy.
that later in our breakfast section. All right, Phil, what's happening with you?
Tanner, I'm glad you asked. It was a great weekend. It was nice. It was slow. We weren't traveling for the 4th weekend in a row. We saw Santa. We saw Mrs. Claus. Mrs. Claus read us a book. That was cool. She was flirting with Santa while reading the kids a book. Kind of weird, but it was kind of funny for the adults. We went to Hollyfest at church, and I got to hang out with my family, hang out with friends, bourbon, drinks, cigars, cards. It was a good time. Wow. And then mixed with all of that.
I hope you had some confession and absolution as well. Am I right, Ted?
Absolutely.
Oh, you Lutherans.
I'm here.
Oh.
Come on in, baby.
But the best part, I shouldn't say the best part because that's not necessarily true, but it was sprinkled in with a little bit of part 3 of the Twitter files. So it's getting good out there in the Twitter world. And yes, Elon is splashing, making noise, and corruption is everywhere, my friends. It's a beautiful thing. So that
He's
was my weekend.
also getting booed in San Francisco. So
I saw that.
Wonder why. Anyways,
What is,
you know,
why do you think that is, Phil?
I don't know. Has something to do with San Francisco and probably the most progressive city, liberal city in the world. I would boo him too, wouldn't you?
Well, probably not. I'm not really that kind of person.
wouldn't you? No. Hard pass.
That's just not the way I roll.
Tanner, you ask us how we're doing, which is very thoughtful of you. I feel like we never actually ask you, Tanner, how are you doing?
Just happy to be here, guys. No, you know what? Things are good. We had a really slow weekend. Sarah was under the weather. She's feeling better though. So we just kind of hung at home, which was really great because that meant that I could not go to Phil's party on Friday night, which I wasn't going to go to anyways because it started at 9 p.m., which
Oh, yikes.
Oh,
You were in
yeah,
bed, right?
Oh, for sure. Oh, Friday night? No, I think I was watching basketball, but I was on the
A little bit
couch.
of NBA. Okay.
A lot of bit at NBA. But yeah, things are good. We're moving along. Heading towards the end of the year, so wrapping up a lot of things, sending out orders. Started to plan out 2023. So I'm getting excited for the new year and all the projects that I've got working on. But we're not here to talk about that. We've got a lot of other things to talk about. The last couple of episodes, we've tried to knock out 3 topics, and then we tried to do 2 topics. And so this episode, we're just going to stick with one topic, something that's been going around. We want to kind of discuss what's been happening with Brittney Griner and her return to the United States. And to kind of talk us through that, introduce that news headline, Katie's going to share that with us. So Katie, what do you got?
Yeah, so Brittney Griner, she was released this weekend and she was retained, if you don't know, retained in Russia for 10 months for drug allegations. Maybe, I think we talked about it was some sort of weed or some sort of just
Like
trafficking
oil,
those
yeah.
drugs, yes, into Russia. And she was over there playing for the WNBA. And so she was released this weekend. So this is big news, a lot of talk around this. And, this is me. I read an article today and really talking about her coming home and her reaction and her character and going around and saying hi to everybody and being really patriotic. And so I thought it was interesting. Anytime I see that there are words associated and really associated with somebody, I think, oh, maybe there's people that actually disagree. So I want to hear your thoughts about this whole situation and about Brittney Griner. What do you guys think?
I'll start us off because I didn't get to talk a lot
Tanner.
last episode. I'm excited. You know what? We'll get into it as we go, but I'm really happy that she's home. I think there was a lot of information that came out, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, she shouldn't have been home. Like this person should be home, or this person should be home." But I want to celebrate the fact that she is home, that she's back, and that she's back in a country like the United States, and is no longer in Russia, where she was detained for something that she should not be detained for. And so I'm really happy that she's home. As everyone's been really talking about, hey, this guy should be home. What was his name? Paul? Like, is that the other guy who's over there right now? That
Paul
everyone's
Whelan.
like, Paul Whelan. They're like, we want him.
David.
He should
David
be home.
Whelan.
David Whelan. Like, he should be home, or this person should be home. The fact that she is back, I think that is something that we should celebrate. I think of the story of the prodigal son. She's returned. We should celebrate. We should be thankful that she is safe and that she's no longer in prison and in those kind of conditions. So that's my first takeaway is that, I'm just happy that a United States citizen is back in the United States.
Ted, what about you, man?
I line up with that a little bit. I do think there's some discussion to be had around, David Whelan's been there longer. His charges seem a little more severe. They lean towards espionage as opposed to drug related. So that's, there's discussion to be had there. I don't know, it gets dicey whenever you're giving up an arms dealer for someone, and that's who
What was
they
his
gave up.
nickname? Like the King of Death? What is it?
Yeah, something like that.
There's some wild name.
And I think they made a
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage movie after him that was based upon that true story. I think it's called
Lord of War.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
kind of a big deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Lord of War. That was his nickname.
No. King of Death was, but the Lord of War is a movie, and
Right.
Based
you have
on
to be
his
that
life.
bad, be based off.
Well, maybe there'll
someone's
be a
life
part
like
two.
To be played by Nick Cage.
that. Exactly.
Hey, let's not knock Nick Cage. That guy is a
Dude,
national
he's having
treasure.
a renaissance. He's
Oh, like what you did there.
coming to
I
Disney
gotcha.
Plus soon. No, I think I don't know if I have deep opinions on it. Like I agree with Tanner of saying I think it's good you get someone like that home. That there did seem to be, she was arrested. It was like the U.S. started speaking out against Russia and Ukraine, and all of a sudden, Brittney Griner, who's been playing in this, league for a long time, all of a sudden she gets busted, and so I think there's some, politicalness in that. But I don't feel qualified to make, was it a good trade? Was it not a good trade?
This
I don't know,
isn't
Phil,
this
where are you
isn't
at?
sports, right? Like in like sports where you're like, oh, you trade this person for this person, and their games kind of line up or their contracts line up. This is not that. It is, this is the deal that they were willing to make, and so that was the deal that we were able to take. Like I don't think it was one of those things where it was just like, well, we're just doing it because we have nothing else to do and we want to make a news story. I think it was, this is how we're going to get one of our citizens back in the United States.
So in the YouTube chat, we're being corrected. Fact checked already.
Merchant of Death.
Merchant
The
of Death.
Merchant of Death.
Thank you.
We can only know
there.
so many things. All right,
That's
Phil,
okay.
bring us in. What do you have? What are your thoughts?
Well, you let us off there, Tanner, with some of your thoughts, and obviously you brought a sense of guilt, bringing in the prodigal son, saying that we should celebrate her life, which is absolutely true, right? We should celebrate
is.
that someone is safe.
He's
someone
about to
is
disagree.
home. She is
for
a
it.
human being. All of these things are really important, right? And I'm happy that Brittney Griner is home with her family. But
Boo.
here we go. There is something to be said that that it was a horrible trade. I mean, I will say this right now. This is not sports, Tanner. I get this, but in terms of if you were to give another human life for another, this is. I mean, if you were to look at someone who is the merchant of death, and you have someone like Brittney Griner. It would appear that we should get even more human beings back for the Merchant of Death. I would hope that Brittney Griner would come back, but David Whalen, it seems like even what he has done is nothing to compare to what the Merchant of Death is, right? To have this particular person traded, and so I think what is frustrating is the question is why couldn't they have gotten more out of this deal? Why couldn't they pressed harder? And I think it has a lot to do. I think that the foreign policy of this presidential administration is really weak. We've seen that with what's happened with the Ukraine war. We've seen that what's happened in Iran. And I hope that as a leader that they will.
So Phil, real quick as you go,
harder.
defend how they're weak in Ukraine.
There was a lot of things that led up to the Ukraine and Russian war that could have been handled differently, said differently to provoke what has happened. I think there's plenty of articles and things out there that would define some of those things. But it is there could have been better leadership that is handled. Now, I don't want to start comparing to the Trump administration and the Obama administration. I think it's just known that Joe Biden has a track record of having really bad foreign policy, and It's almost as if the guy got played a little bit. So, again, happy that Brittney's back. She's a human life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So to throw that into sports terms, we don't have the great GM in the front office.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And there's something to be said where where David Whalen's been there for 4 years now. This is the anniversary. And of course, the Russian regime, they're probably going to be wanting and asking for even more. Now that they know they've gotten Griner for the Merchant of Death, who else can they get back? And I don't know who's in our system and who we've arrested, but it seems like, we can continue to get played, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So one quick thing, real quick, Tanner. This is a quick. I messed up. David Whalen is his brother who put out a statement. It is Paul Whalen.
Paul Whalen.
Okay, Paul Whalen.
Yeah. His brother David put out a statement. I have. So.
And I think there's somebody else over there. Mark Fogel, I think, is over there too. Just something I saw on the internet floating around. I think going into this conversation, the thing that I was most concerned about was that, Brittney Griner did not ask for this to happen to her. And she also did not ask, right? Like this. And so like, she was like the recipient of grace in the situation. And so the last thing that I want for her is for people to be saying like, you should still be there. This person should be back. Like, along the lines of making her feel terrible for the grace that she was shown to be back in America while somebody else is still over there. Right. And like, I don't want that to be popping up on the headlines of like, no, she should be back in America. She should still be over there. And this person should be there. Like, I just don't think that's very kind, dare I say, American to treat her that way. Katie, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Right. And I agree with you, Tanner. I see both sides, and there's kind of like a tension that I'm holding because for Brittney herself, I agree with you because I don't like I'm thinking a lot about what you're saying. Like we should celebrate that something happened, right? That there was breakthrough, that a deal was made, we got her back. At the same time, I don't want this political party to wave their flag and like look at all the great that we can do. And actually, there's obviously more, that there's other lives that we could bring back, and that's just what we know from media. There's plenty of lives, and I think about people that are suffering and imprisoned for all sorts of reasons, that really should have their name on headlines, that don't have a platform, that really should be fought for, not just because their name is redundant in media, right? So I see that as well, but yeah, I agree with you, Tanner. I think we need to celebrate that something was done, and at the same time, not let this be like, oh, good job for doing this, now you get a pass. I think there's like a dualism in it as well. There's a tension being held, and I like that you said that with Brittney. I am so glad she's back with her family, and so glad that she's adjusting and hopefully getting the help that she needs to adjust back into everyday life. I was reading an article that said that many people, when they come back, they have to go through a lot of mental health, and she's going through a lot of screening, physical, mental, emotional health screenings. Like, listen, who knows what happened over there, and who knows what's going on during that time. So like you said, Phil, it's a human life. So those are just some of the thoughts that I had.
And there's going to be a recovery process, and there's a lot of information out there with people who are detainees that were in these prison camps, like Brittney Griner was, even for a short period of time, that has done a number on them. So obviously, pray for a recovery. And I think we can all agree that we're celebrating this thing. And I think there's no disagreement of that. I think where it gets interesting and a little bit fuzzier, and the question I have for you, do you think this was more of a political move to get Brittney out compared to someone like Whalen? Does the
say more about
optics?
That. Yeah, explain a little bit more.
So I think I know what you're saying.
I think I got
but
you.
I want to hear what Phil has to say about that, because I think there's a little bit more.
There was a release by the Biden administration that this was a great day for America, because they reinforce that Brittney Griner, who is not only a WNBA star, a time gold medalist for Team USA, which is awesome, right? And also a black female who is gay. And this is a great day for all people who identify being gay, so that they feel more safe. Which obviously, if you identify being gay and you're in a country like Russia, yeah, that is a scary thing, even more so than being in the United States. So because of her context of who she is, was it more of a, we need to get her out because this is Brittney Griner? And then Nancy Pelosi just came out like, what a great day to celebrate Brittney Griner. Again, we're all celebrating, right? And how ironic that this is the same day that the same-sex safe, I forget which marriage act was passed today. What a beautiful thing that has happened. And so you look at that and said, man, does this seem more of like a political move rather than a saving a human life move?
Ted, did you want to comment on
Well,
that?
I think
started.
I think politics is always going to be about. We should name podcasts about elephants. I think the optics is always going to be a part of what politics does, right? You're always in an election cycle, and so if you look and you say that I 100% believe there were discussions as this was happening about optics. Now, my question would be, were they ever going after Paul Whelan, or was the goal solely Brittney Griner, right? Because Whelan has been there for a long time. And again, you have different caveats. For him, it's spying, which is very different than a drug-related thing. It happens in 2018 versus right before the lead up to the Ukraine conflict. So you have a lot of those things. But it does, I think you're right, Phil. It feels like they gave up a lot for, you don't want to say a little, it's someone's life. But they gave up a lot.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's, I think that's how you can differentiate, is saying, it's not that Brittney Griner didn't deserve to be free or to be brought home, whatever. But putting someone like this guy back into the world is a big question mark. And you do have to ask, okay, how much of this was propaganda by Russia? How much of it was, if you get arrested in the U.S. as a foreign citizen, you get arrested? Like, was Brittney Griner actually breaking a law? And that's something I will say I'll plead ignorance. I haven't read enough about, like, I heard she was arrested and that it sounded like it was trumped up. I didn't dig deep enough to be like, okay, what did she say? What's going on?
Well, I think we can all assume that Russia made it much more worse than probably.
Right. They wanted something public.
Yep.
Oh, I think they might have a track record of that.
Yeah. Well, and there's definitely, this guy, the Merchant of Death guy, Victor Bout, like, he said, like, oh yeah, he is on the Putin train, right? He got released by Putin, so he's, I'm for the conflict in Ukraine, I'm all these things, and you go, yeah, so is this a reformed guy going back and, going to live off his Swiss bank account, or is he going to get back in the game? Someone who has professed to say, the West is trying to bring down Russia, and so is he going to try and feed weapons to enemies of the West? I don't know.
Exactly.
But that seems like a lot to give away. And that's the weird tension, is like, man, it got someone home, which is a huge deal. But if other people are dying because this guy starts getting guns into hands of people, did you try hard enough for something else where you didn't have to give him up?
Yeah.
So,
and that's the question. And then the other thing that comes to mind too, is, Brittney had quite the big platform of, people increasing awareness that she was, in Russia. She's in this camp and everything. The WNBA is like, bring Brittney home, which is awesome. Like, I'm all for those things. Even in Katie, our friend who used to go to our church, she's now the head basketball coach at Baylor. She's put stuff out there because Brittney Griner was one of the basketball players at Baylor. And like, these are all really good things that we need to increase awareness, but she had a much bigger platform, while Whelan, I mean, I didn't know who Waylon was until this all happened. Like, to be honest with you, but
until
then
Griner was arrested. Yeah,
exactly. But now you feel for the guy, 4 years being, well, what he would say is wrongfully arrested for espionage, and which I get is a serious crime if he actually did that. But it just seems like, man, he's got no one that has a voice for him now.
It's
that's
interesting
right now.
Yeah, it's interesting reading his brother's comments on it, because his thing is they had to get Brittney home, like, and that's fascinating as someone who has family imprisoned over there. And the first half of his statement is they had to do it, like they had to get her home, and if they had that opportunity, he says you got to take it. Yeah. And he said this time around, they let them know in advance that his brother was not coming home. They said in other prisoner swaps, it's reported that there's a prisoner swap happening, and it sounds like they got their hopes up, and then Paul wasn't coming home.
Yeah.
And so he said he was thankful for that, but the second half of his statement is, what has our government done for a former Marine falsely imprisoned? Mm-hmm. And that's a fascinating tension to live in, to rejoice with someone who gets what you've been fighting for. There's no ill will here for him towards Brittney Griner or her family. I mean, he is on the borderline of celebratory to say this is good. But then, man, how do you feel when it's what you've wanted but someone else gets it? Like, that's tough.
When your prayer that you've been praying, someone else gets the answer for.
Yeah.
That's a tough place to live as a human being in general. We did have a comment on YouTube. CJU says, "Don't you think things are already so bad with Russia that we don't lose much by trading Bout back? He's already served more than half of his sentence here." And I thought that was an interesting comment as well, where it's like we're trading somebody in their later years of playing. Is he going to offer anything to the team?
Right. Has he been out of weapons? Is that part of the reason? Is they go, listen, we got him out of this world, so many years ago. It's advanced so much, he's not going to be able to get back in. Maybe that's what they're looking and saying is like, his contacts are gone, the people he sold to was gone, like, and that might be the State Department might know more about that and say, yeah, this is the guy.
They hopefully do.
Yeah, right? You hope, right?
You would hope, but also you never really know. But you would think that like they're going into this like saying we're weighing all of our options, we're weighing all of our odds, and I would hope that it's not just some sort of like like Phil brought up, it's not just some sort of like political move because of who Brittney Griner is, but it's more so of a kind of what Waylon's brother was saying was like, we had a chance, like you have to take the chance, like that's what it came down to, is like you take the move that's right in front of you.
And I also I hope, like I hear what you're saying, and I'm going back to like what Phil said, like Tanner, you were commenting on that, is it kind of, is this a political move to reinforce the social narrative that's going on with just like the left side and social issues and a lot of the things that are going around that are very very popular right now in the thinking. I would hope that that this is not using pawns and people and vulnerability to play on political moves. I would hope not. Part of me, I don't. This is not a fact. You don't know. Who knows what their agenda really is, if there is one. But there is a pattern. There are things that we see that happen where there are lives at stake and they're using lives. And it's almost a detour to say, oh, this is a life. We have to celebrate this. But a detour and masking really the real agenda going on. And because it evokes so much emotion, sometimes people are blinded by really what that means. And so part of me, when Phil asked that question, I was like, no doubt they could be doing this to reinforce maybe a social narrative going on because a lot of the things that go on with, I'm going to say it again, but with critical theory and queer theory and critical race theory and all the things that are really coming up right now, it's a lot of it is taught and indoctrinated through human emotion when it's taken advantage of when people are vulnerable. So now I'm just shining light on that. Who knows if that is exactly what's going on in this case? I would hope not. So I can still sit in that tension, celebrate Brittney, but also see, hey, there might be an agenda very well, because I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, and let me be Phil for a moment, and I'll be very short here.
Oh yeah,
Ooh, this is gonna be really interesting.
Right? To say like, let's look at the opposite side. No, I'll never be Phil.
Take off your hat, Ted.
If it's a Republican president, do they bring home the former Marine?
Oh, and they get slammed if they don't bring home Brittney Griner, I'm sure.
Right, and I wonder if that's like, I'm so jaded on politics. I would go, yeah, this is almost as clear cut a party line as you can say, where you go, if it's a Republican president with the opportunity, he goes to the vet. And now again, that is so completely unfair to Brittney Griner, to Paul Whelan. Like you said that beautifully,
their
Katie,
pawns
to say
and their
these
game,
are people. But would it be flipped if someone else were in office?
Right.
And I think, okay, so the live thing, 1 for 1, ton of lives. I get this. I'm with you. I think where I get frustrated was from the very beginning, like, man, we could have made a better deal. If you know me, one of my favorite do is to go into a car dealership and get the best freaking deal that's there.
I've been present for it.
It scares
one of your favorite things to do is this.
This is amazing. Hey, Tanner, what are you doing on Saturday?
Man.
You want to go buy a car? I'll buy one for
Absolutely
you. I'll
not.
get so much more money
Absolutely
off.
not.
It's gonna be great. All right. And here's the deal: we are the United States of America. We have a lot of power, right? Hey, Putin, you want your boy back? If you don't want to give us both of these lives, hey, I'm going to continue to fund more of this Ukraine war, and you're not going to like this. I'm going to make your life even harder and more difficult. But no, we have leverage, and I think that's what's really hard is like, man, they can't make a deal like that. Sure, we got Brittney, celebrate. Let's do this. But you could have got more for the Merchant of Death.
Looks like
Phil for Secretary of State.
We're currently trending on Twitter. It says Klopke 2024.
No, please don't.
Love it.
Absolutely not.
Well, I don't know. I think that's a good point, Phil. Is like I think hearing your frustration of saying like, it's great that she's home. We've said that 1,000 times. We'll probably say it again. But like, that was the deal. Like, you couldn't have thrown in anything else. Like, you couldn't have done like we'll give you these two for these two. Like, that's just. I think that is, the more that I think about it, it's more frustrating. Like, yeah, we should rejoice, but also at the same time, like, come on now, couldn't we have filled that plane?
Well, and it doesn't look good when Nancy Pelosi immediately ties it to something else, right?
Yep.
And that is, if the Republicans have a downfall of, in terms of PR, right? This is purely PR. This is not platforms. This is not anything. I'm totally talking about PR. If Republicans oftentimes, their issue is looking like the weird nerd room, PR terms, right? Like they don't understand this, they don't understand that, they only see their point of view. That happens a lot. The issue with the left and the Democrats a lot of times is they think they're really cool, and then they kind of like latch onto something thinking they're looking great, and you're just like, you guys look really dumb. And that, I hadn't heard that thing about Nancy Pelosi, and you just go, the greater win would have been just to focus on Brittney Griner. Mm-hmm. And to not say anything about anything else, and just leave it at that. But when you then take it and hitch it to your domestic political agenda, Phil, I think that plays into a little bit of what you're saying about was this a political move? Mm-hmm. And even being opportunistic, even if it wasn't. Go ahead.
Okay, so I get that. Sorry for interrupting, Ted. This is a podcast. We interrupt people. Go. So what are your thoughts on this, right? Brittney Griner has a history with domestic violence that has been reported in the past. But the big thing is, one of the things that when we were talking about standing and kneeling for the national anthem, Brittney Griner has vocally said before that the national anthem has no place in WNBA sports. Again, I understand where they're coming from. This was a lot to do with Black Lives and the Black Lives Matter whole movement and with what happened. And so, I mean, I guess we don't fully understand her full context. She could be talking about that and not just the country itself. But doesn't that also make things pretty interesting, too? When you have someone who served their country and you have someone that's saying, listen, like, I don't stand up for America.
Exactly my same thoughts when Ted was talking about if it was the different person, a Republican in office, the different moves, bringing maybe a military person home, and thinking about a lot of the controversy around this is that she's not patriotic, and maybe bringing somebody home that did serve their country would be a better move and more honorable. So interesting that you said that, because I also mentioned the article where they explicitly made sure they put in there that when she arrived on the plane, that their definition of patriotic was that she shook everyone's hands, was very thankful, very lively. And I'm like, oh, interesting that they would say that, because whenever there's language, there's rhetoric around somebody that it seems like an unnecessary statement, it must be very controversial. And I'm looking into that she doesn't want the anthem played before the WNBA, probably raises maybe some questions of, should we be fighting on behalf of somebody that was serving our country? So those were some of the thoughts I had as well.
There was a article that was sent over to us from Yahoo, and this was back in July 27th, 2020. So this was 2020. And She kind of talks about, like, it's no disrespect to the military, how her father was in Vietnam and a law officer for 30 years, and how she wanted to be a cop before playing basketball, and that she does have pride in her country. And I don't know, like, I wonder what she will say, what she's going to say now that she's home, and the difference that is, and the work that America has been doing, and a lot of the conversations that have happened since 2020. Right, like since totally. Then, and the quote that we found in this Yahoo article, and we can put that up on places, is she says, "I personally don't think it belongs in sports." Thinking of the anthem, that people didn't have rights at that point. It's hard disrespecting a song that didn't even represent Americans when it was first made. And so, I mean, I don't know what to make of all that kind of stuff. Like I don't play sports or have to. Yeah,
I asked a hypothetical, but we had a comment on YouTube. And I went and looked it up. Trump claims that he turned down a prisoner swap bout for Waylon in 2018. So maybe that's our answer. And his reasoning was, this is on his Truth Social on Sunday night. He said, "I wouldn't have made the deal for 100 people in exchange for someone that has killed untold numbers of people with his arms deals."
So, are you saying that there was a potential swap between the Merchant of Death and Waylon before on the table? Okay,
that's what Trump is claiming. He's saying this happened. He goes on to say he would have gotten Paul out. And this, the question is this him as he gears up for a presidential campaign? Sure. I wouldn't be surprised if there was one and he turned it down. Sure. But that's
interesting.
That adds into it, yeah. And that, Phil, that goes back to administrations, like you were saying. Like, was that, what is that?
Again, just so I'm on the record too, and saying this, and I brought up the question about the national anthem and Brittney, and again, there are things. Being a white male, I'm not going to fully understand the context of what Brittney Griner and other people of different cultural backgrounds have experienced. And so I think for me personally, I have observed all the kneeling that is happening, and I know that it's a very complex thing that has happened. So I think my thought is it's going to be interesting with what she just went through, how maybe that might evolve in time. And still, I'm still happy that she's back. And
I think
it's just really interesting when you look at all these different things, and you just like, there's so much noise around you about like, well, look at her, you know, and look at this, and man, it's just, these are the cultural conversations that we're having right now, my
well,
friends.
Are
and
you saying that
we
our world is a little bit messy? Huh. Interesting.
well, and I was gonna say I think that's kind of as we've talked. I feel like this is where we've landed. As we say, hey, we want to be at conversations. How do we talk about this? This is a conversation where I don't think any of us fall direct. We see a lot of lines, and Tanner, that's where I was going to go, kind of to say, hey, maybe this is where we kind of close it out. Is like sometimes there are situations where you go, in the same breath, I can be excited and happy that Brittney comes home, and also question and say, but was it the best way possible?
Yeah.
And it's not clear cut, it's not easy, but I think you can live in that place that says, listen, she's home with her family, and throw out everything political, everything else, she's home.
Yeah,
But then I can also look and see the other side.
So let's close with this question: is the response of the Christian, right? As people who are hopeful, as people who are looking for good and looking for ways for people to feel safe and loved and cared for, and to give them a seat at the table, right? All these things that we all believe in different words or less. What is our response then to this, right? Katie, what do you think?
Yeah. So, my first thought with all of this is the sovereignty of God. Even in the midst of political agenda, whatever things are going on in culture, God is so sovereign and he sees every life. And I think just standing back and looking at this as a Christian, I always think, in some way, when I think of God's sovereignty, even the really, really tough things that are happening in other people's lives that, we're hoping for other people to better deals. And we see all through scripture, people mess it up, but God is still good and he still has his way. And even in the suffering or even in things that are unjust or unfair, I trust that in these lives that he's still working and moving and doing what God does best and glorifying himself. Those are some of my thoughts about that. God's sovereignty, that's the big word that I always see over these things, that when man has so much, seems like they have so much control, I think of God's sovereignty.
Phil, Ted, any final thoughts?
I think I'll jump in with someone hopped in on the YouTube chat here and said, I think what sucks in general is that when something good happens connected to a political move, we are excited and thankful, but then almost immediately suspicious. And I think that's a comment that goes, Katie, so well with what you said of saying, I can see God at work. I can see him, moving justice in the world. But how dark is our world that almost immediately I have questions about the motives. And I think where I'd leave it is, and that was my brother commenting on the chat, and I think for me that's a beautiful sum up, is like, how do I be joyful in the midst of uncertainty? Yeah. And that's where I'd land.
So I'm going to kind of like backtrack because, I brought up the illustrations of what Nancy Pelosi had to say of how this is all connected on the same day where a new same-sex safety act was approved and voted on and all that, where it's like, oh, it's politicized and all that stuff. So let me say this, because I think this is some of my, as a response as a Christian hopeful in a world and culture that's far different than what we believe. So even though, let's say, Brittney Griner identifies as a gay woman, she is an image bearer that has been created by God, and I'm glad that she is home and she is safe. And for all my other friends out there who identify being gay, and my personal belief is God's design for marriage is for man and woman, but I do believe that my friends, my brothers and sisters who are out there and who identify that way, they should feel safe, And it is a big day for them as image bearers, that they feel that they have safety. They feel that they can celebrate something like this. So I don't want to diminish those things, because I think it's important for people to be able to have rights. I don't necessarily believe we are a Christian country. We do have maybe some Christian values that are there. And I find it, I can see that it is a day of celebration where someone is returned home, where a place where she would be unsafe in foreign countries like Russia, and where she could be in a place that you do have safety, even in the United States of America, with all the messiness and tension that's happening. So I'm so thankful for all people that bear the image of God, and that she is protected, and I celebrate that, and I can honestly say that.
Yeah,
awesome.
We are certainly glad that she's home, and it'll be interesting to, because the story's not over yet. Like, the story is only just beginning. More will come out. There will probably be a 30 for 30 at some point on this story, and I hope there is. But also, like, now she's entering into a different phase of her life. Right? This is a big deal. This is a traumatic experience, and so to be able to, I don't know, we have a small little podcast where we can say, like, hey, we're glad you're home and we support you. And I hope that when people go to when they go to her games, that they cheer for her, and that she's not booed. Absolutely. And that she is reminded again and again that we are glad that you are here. And in a lot of ways, and the analogy every analogy kind of breaks down, but what a beautiful way this is for us to think about how God welcomes us home, right? How, we are far off, and yet he says, come home, welcome home. And so that's my takeaway for that. We're going to close out the episode. So thanks for joining us for this episode of Everyday Elephants. Before you stop listening, make sure to subscribe. So if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, become our 20th subscriber. Watch out. Oh boy. If you're on Facebook with us, like our Facebook page. Oh boy, amazing. Or if you're listening on any of the podcast streams, go ahead and just, follow us, subscribe to us, because we have more episodes coming out in the future weeks as well. And if you're interested in being a sponsor for the podcast, or have a topic that you would like for us to discuss, send us an email, or if you have any of our numbers or Instagram handles or Twitter handles, send us a message and let us know, or you can email us at everydayelephantspod@gmail.com. We love to get mail. All right, that'll do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your graciousness and for understanding when we don't get names correctly, or when we call somebody by the wrong nickname. That's going to happen again. All right, that'll do it for us. Have a great week, everybody.